Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
You know, we've had some really interesting listener questions and source material come in about a subject
Mm-hmm.
that I think a lot of people think they have a pretty good handle on, but
Right.
we're going to find out maybe there's more to it than meets the eye.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Composting.
Composting.
And
Yeah.
I, for one, when I first started gardening, I thought, oh,
Gotcha.
composting. Yeah, I get it. You throw some scraps in a bin,
Yeah.
some leaves, you mix it up, good to go.
Totally. You would think. You would think.
But there's a lot more nuance to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things that holds people back
Yeah.
is this idea that composting is a smelly process.
Yeah, I have to admit, even before I started, I pictured,
Uh,
these kind of stinking mounds of garbage.
Yeah.
It's not very appealing.
no, not at all. And it's really a misconception.
Yeah.
A healthy compost pile shouldn't smell like rotting garbage.
Okay.
It should have this kind of earthy, pleasant aroma. So if it is starting to smell foul, it's usually a sign that something's off.
So what causes that?
Well, often
Is it the stuff you're putting in there?
it can be,
Right.
but often it's a lack of oxygen.
Okay.
When organic matter decomposes without enough oxygen,
Yeah.
it produces compounds like hydrogen sulfide,
Right.
which has that,
Which is not a good smell.
that rotten egg smell.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like you're suffocating the good guys in there.
Yeah, you're basically suffocating the microorganisms that are supposed to be breaking down that material.
And that's why you're supposed to like turn it and stuff.
Exactly. So turning that compost pile regularly
Yeah.
is crucial for aeration.
Okay.
It lets that oxygen penetrate the pile. It supports the growth of those beneficial aerobic bacteria
Yeah.
that are breaking down the organic matter efficiently and odorlessly.
So it's really kind of an active process.
Yeah.
Huh?
It's a little more active than people think.
You can't just set it and forget it.
No. Yeah, I mean, how often you turn, it depends on a bunch of factors.
Yeah.
The size of the pile, what you're composting,
Okay.
the weather.
Yeah.
But at least once a week is a good starting point.
All right. So you don't want it to be too stinky. What about pests?
Mm-hmm.
I know people who've had problems with
Yeah.
rodents and insects getting in their compost. Is that just like an inevitable part of it?
It's definitely a concern.
Yeah.
But again, a well-managed compost pile is far less likely to attract pests.
Okay.
It really comes down to a few key factors: the type of bin that you're using
Okay.
and the balance of materials in your compost.
Okay. So let's start with the bin. What kind of bin is best?
A closed bin with a secure lid is essential.
Okay.
It keeps rodents out.
Yeah.
It helps contain odors, which can also attract insects.
Right.
And you can even find bins with special features like mesh bottoms that allow air circulation but keep those pests from burrowing in.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So that's the bin.
Hmm.
What about the stuff that we're putting in the compost?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So things like meat and dairy products
Okay.
are known to attract rodents and flies.
Yeah.
So if you're composting those, it's even more important to have a secure bin.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Right.
And I know I've heard that you need the right balance of
Yeah.
the greens and the browns in there.
Exactly.
So greens are the food scraps, right?
Right, the nitrogen-rich materials.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
food scraps. And then the browns are the carbon-rich materials,
Okay.
like leaves and shredded paper.
Yeah.
Too many greens
Uh-huh.
can make the compost too wet and dense,
Okay.
and that creates an environment that's attractive to certain pests.
Okay.
A good balance helps ensure proper airflow,
Yeah.
helps regulate the moisture,
Okay.
makes it less appealing to those unwanted visitors.
So it's really about creating a good environment
Yeah.
in there for the right.
It's all about balance.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I've also heard people say that composting is too complicated,
Right.
that there's all these ratios and techniques and
Yeah, it can feel a bit overwhelming at first, for sure.
yeah.
There's so much information out there. But at its core,
Yeah.
composting is a simple process.
Okay.
It's about mimicking nature's way of breaking down organic matter.
Okay.
So the fundamental principle is mixing those greens and browns
Yeah.
we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Aim for a roughly equal ratio, but don't get too hung up on exact measurements. You can always adjust as you go.
Okay. So it's a little bit forgiving.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's more about observation
Yeah.
and adjusting as you learn.
Okay. So you don't need like a special compost thermometer.
No, not at all,
Mm.
especially when you're starting out.
Right. Okay. So that takes care of the complicated part.
Mhm.
What about people who say it takes too long?
Well, traditional composting can take several months,
Yeah.
especially in cooler climates.
Right.
But there are methods like the Berkeley method
Okay.
that can significantly speed up the process.
So I've heard of that. That's supposed to be super fast, right?
Yeah. It can produce usable compost in as little as 18 days.
Wow. 18 days.
Under ideal conditions, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it does involve
Yeah.
carefully managing things like
Yeah.
the material composition, the particle size,
Okay.
moisture levels, aeration.
So it's like a compost boot camp.
Yeah, exactly. It's more hands-on.
Okay.
But for those who need compost quickly
Mm-hmm.
and are willing to put in the extra effort,
Yeah.
the Berkeley method could be a game changer.
Okay. So we have options.
Yeah.
We have the slower route. We
Right.
have the super fast route.
Exactly. And there are other variations and techniques too.
Okay.
The key is to find what suits your needs, your space, your time commitment.
All right. So one last thing before we move on.
Mm-hmm.
I've always heard that hot composting
Yes.
kills all the weed seeds.
That's what people think, right?
Yeah. So you can just chuck all your weedy stuff in there and it's fine.
Unfortunately, it's not entirely true.
Really?
Yeah. While high temperatures can kill many weed seeds, it's not foolproof.
Okay. Yeah.
Not all compost piles consistently reach the temperatures needed to eliminate all those seeds.
Yeah. Interesting.
And some seeds are just remarkably resilient.
I've learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
I've definitely had some surprise volunteers in my garden
Right, exactly.
from weed seeds that made it through the compost bin.
The key is really to try to manage those weeds
Yeah.
before they go to seed,
Right.
before they even get into the compost pile.
Yeah.
If you do have weed seeds in your compost, there are other techniques like solarization, using the sun's heat. You can do that before composting
Okay.
that can help kill those seeds.
So err on the side of caution?
Yes, definitely. It's
Yeah.
better to be proactive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and prevent them from spreading through your compost.
Okay. So we've already kind of debunked some common myths
Mm-hmm.
and talked about the importance of aeration, balancing those materials.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
that
all
was-
about creating that right environment
Yeah.
for those beneficial microorganisms to do their thing.
Okay. Now, I want to touch on something that I found really interesting when I was reading up on this.
Huh?
Bokashi composting. Have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah.
It seems like a whole different world from what we've been talking about.
It is, yeah. It's a fascinating alternative,
Okay.
especially for those who want to compost
Yeah.
a wider range of kitchen scraps,
Okay.
including meat and dairy.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So how is it different?
So, unlike traditional composting, which we've been discussing, which is aerobic, relies on oxygen.
Yeah.
Bokashi utilizes an anaerobic environment. So
Yeah.
it happens in the absence of oxygen.
So that's like those bacteria at the bottom of the ocean where there's no oxygen?
Exactly.
Wow.
And just like those deep sea bacteria,
Yeah.
the microorganisms in Bokashi composting thrive in oxygen-deprived environments.
Wow.
But instead of relying on heat, Bokashi composting uses fermentation.
Fermentation.
Yeah,
So is it more like making sauerkraut than
Yeah.
making a compost pile?
you can say that.
That's so interesting.
So the Bokashi method uses a special brand
Okay.
inoculated with these beneficial microorganisms
Okay.
that ferment the food waste,
Mm-hmm.
and that produces a pre-compost
Okay.
that you can then add to your soil or a traditional compost pile.
So it's like a two-step process.
Exactly.
Bokashi and then the regular compost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And because it's anaerobic,
Yeah.
Bokashi composting can be done in an airtight container,
Okay.
which is great for those with limited space.
Yeah.
Or if you want to compost indoors.
This is so cool.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty amazing.
So we've got all these different methods. We
Right.
talked about traditional hot composting.
Yeah.
We talked about bokashi.
Yeah.
So before we go any further,
Yeah.
let's recap what we've learned.
Okay.
We've busted some myths about composting. We've looked at different techniques like that Berkeley method.
Yeah.
And now we've even touched on anaerobic composting with bokashi.
Yeah. It's a whole different world out there.
Yeah, this is fascinating stuff.
It is. And we've only just scratched the surface.
Okay.
There's so much more to explore.
So what else are we going to talk about?
Well, we're going to be talking about the environmental benefits
Okay.
of composting.
Okay.
We're going to talk about how compost enhances soil health.
Okay.
But first, we're going to take a short break.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So welcome back.
All right, so we've explored different approaches to composting.
Yeah.
But let's talk about why we even do it in the first place.
Sure.
What's so great about compost? Why do gardeners call it black gold?
Yeah.
What is it that plants love so much about this stuff?
Well, it's more than just having like the right nutrients.
Okay.
It's really how those nutrients are delivered
Okay.
and how compost changes the structure of the soil itself.
So it's not just like
Yeah.
plant food.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
doing something
Like
to the soil.
salt. Exactly.
Okay.
So think about it this way.
Yeah.
Chemical fertilizers, they're like giving your plants a sugary drink.
Okay.
It's a quick boost.
Okay.
But it doesn't address the long-term health of the soil.
Yeah.
Compost, on the other hand,
Yeah.
is like a balanced meal
Okay.
that nourishes both the plants and the soil.
So it's kind of like slow release.
That's one aspect of it, yeah.
Okay.
Compost is packed with nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and a bunch of micronutrients that are missing in a lot of soils these days.
Okay.
And these nutrients are released gradually as that compost decomposes,
Okay.
providing like a consistent source of plant food.
Okay. So it's slow release.
Yeah.
But you said it also does something to the soil structure.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Soil structure refers to how those soil particles are arranged and bound together.
Okay.
Good soil structure has tons of pore space,
Okay.
which lets air and water move around freely.
Okay.
So compost actually helps improve that in a couple of ways.
All right.
First, it adds organic matter to the soil, and that organic matter acts like a sponge,
Okay.
absorbing and holding moisture,
Okay.
making it available to plants.
Okay.
Second,
Yeah.
compost introduces beneficial microorganisms,
Okay.
and those microorganisms help bind those soil particles together,
Okay.
creating those pore spaces.
So the compost is feeding the plants, but it's also making it easier for them to access everything they need.
Exactly. It's like creating this luxurious spa
Yeah.
for your plant's roots.
Wow. So it's like a win-win
It is, yeah.
all around.
It really is.
It's really interesting how something so simple can have that big of an effect.
Right. It's
Amazing.
on soil health.
It is. It's a perfect example of
Yeah.
nature working in cycles,
Yeah.
constantly breaking down and rebuilding,
Mm.
turning waste into resources.
Yeah, that makes me think about the bigger picture, too.
Yeah,
The environment.
exactly.
How does composting benefit the environment?
So when organic waste ends up in a landfill,
It decomposes anaerobically,
Right.
which produces methane,
okay,
a really potent greenhouse gas.
yeah,
When you compost,
Yeah.
that organic matter
Yes.
decomposes aerobically,
right,
producing carbon dioxide,
okay.
a less harmful greenhouse gas.
So basically we're keeping all that methane
Yeah.
out of the atmosphere.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It also helps conserve natural resources
Okay.
by recycling food scraps
Yeah.
and yard waste. We reduce the need to extract
Okay.
and produce chemical fertilizers,
Yeah.
other soil amendments.
So we're not
Yeah.
taking as much from the earth,
Exactly.
but we're still getting all the benefits.
Yeah, it's like closing the loop on the waste cycle,
Yeah.
turning what we call trash
Yeah.
into a valuable resource.
I like that, closing the loop.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about traditional composting, we've talked about bokashi.
hmm
Are there other methods out there?
Yeah. There are actually a bunch of different methods.
Okay.
Each one has its pros and cons.
Yeah.
So we already talked about hot composting,
Uh-huh.
which is great for handling large volumes of material.
Okay.
We talked about bokashi, which is ideal for a variety of kitchen scraps,
Yeah.
including meat and dairy.
Yeah.
But there are other options.
Like what?
Well, there's vermicomposting,
Okay.
which uses worms.
Worms.
Yeah.
Okay.
So red wiggler worms are really efficient composters.
Okay.
They eat food scraps and other organic materials
Mhm.
and produce these nutrient-rich castings.
So you're basically creating a worm farm.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep.
And you can do it indoors or outdoors.
Okay.
And it's a great option for people with limited space.
Yeah.
It's also a fun way to get kids involved.
That's a good point. Get
Yeah.
them interested early.
Exactly.
You else?
There's trench compost.
And composting.
Yeah, it's where you bury food scraps
Okay.
directly in your garden beds.
So you just dig a hole and throw it in there.
Well, it's a little more to it than
Yeah.
that. You want to make sure the trench is deep enough
Right.
so it doesn't attract pests and you're going
Yeah.
to cover them with soil.
Okay.
But it's great for heavy feeders,
Okay.
like tomatoes and squash.
So you're giving the nutrients right to the roots.
Exactly.
Wow. So many options.
There are a lot of options, yeah.
It doesn't have to be one size fits all.
No, not at all.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot.
We have.
What would you say to someone who's like, I don't know, I'm thinking about composting, but
Yeah.
it seems overwhelming?
Yeah. I would say don't be intimidated.
Okay.
Just start small.
Okay.
Experiment. You don't need anything fancy.
Okay.
You don't have to be an expert.
So, like, where do they begin?
The easiest thing is just start collecting your food scraps
Okay.
instead of throwing them in the trash.
Okay.
Once you see how much you actually have,
Yeah.
it might motivate you to find a way to use it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And there are tons of resources available
Yeah.
online, in libraries, to help you figure out what method's right for you.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
Talk to local gardening groups,
Right.
master gardeners.
Yeah.
People are usually pretty happy to share what they've learned.
I like that there's like a
Yeah.
composting community.
There is.
It's very cool.
It's a really great community.
All right, so I'm feeling inspired.
I'm glad to hear it.
We've learned a lot about composting and
Yeah.
why it's beneficial.
It's pretty amazing.
So what else is there?
Well, there's more, but first we're going to take another quick break.
All right, sounds good. All right, we're back.
Back for more composting fun.
I am having fun.
Good, I'm glad.
So we've covered a lot.
We have.
Debunked myths, we talked about science, we even got into bokashi.
Yeah, it's been a pretty thorough exploration.
But I gotta admit,
Mm-hmm.
I still have some questions.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So earlier you mentioned the smell of a healthy compost pile,
Yeah.
like that earthy smell. What is it that creates that smell?
That's a great question. A lot of people wonder about that.
Yeah.
So that smell is mainly due to a compound called geosmin.
Geosmin.
Geosmin, yeah.
Ah!
That sounds
with the mouthful.
like a magical earth spirit or something.
It does. It does. It's produced by a type of bacteria called Streptomyces,
Okay.
which thrives in oxygen-rich environments.
So when our compost pile is happy and aerated,
Yeah.
those streptomyces, they're releasing this
Exactly.
geosmin.
They give off that geosmin,
Yeah, it's so cool.
which gives it that nice earthy smell.
Yeah.
So if your compost smells good, it's usually a good sign.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
So we know that compost is good for the soil,
Mm-hmm.
but how exactly does it make the soil better?
Right. So compost provides a slow and steady release of those essential nutrients,
Yeah.
like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium,
Right.
that are really important for plant growth.
Okay.
And unlike chemical fertilizers,
Yeah.
which deliver a quick burst.
Compost releases those nutrients slowly as it decomposes.
Okay, so it's not just a quick hit.
Right. It's not like a sugar rush.
Yeah, it's more like...
It's providing a longer-term source of nourishment.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But compost also does more than just deliver nutrients, right?
Yeah, it's not just about the food itself.
Yeah.
It's about setting the table, so to speak.
Okay, what does that mean?
So compost introduces all these beneficial microorganisms into the soil.
Okay.
And those microorganisms play a crucial role
Mm-hmm.
in breaking down organic matter,
Okay.
making those nutrients available to plants.
So they're like little helpers in there.
Yeah, exactly. They're the workforce of the soil.
They're doing all the hard work.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
It's pretty amazing.
This has been a really great deep dive, I think.
Yeah, me too.
We've learned a lot about composting, the science,
Mm-hmm.
the different methods,
A lot of op-eds.
and how it can benefit our gardens and the environment.
Yeah, it's been a really comprehensive look at compost.
So as we finish up here,
Yeah.
what would you say to encourage our listeners to
Wow.
give composting a try?
Just embrace the journey. Start small, experiment, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Discover the joy of transforming what was once waste
Yeah.
into this valuable resource
Well, I love that.
for your garden and the planet.
All right. So there you have it, folks.
Yeah.
Composting, it's not just good for your garden. It's
Mhm.
good for the planet.
Absolutely.
And it can be a fun and rewarding process.
It really can.
So thanks for joining us for this dip dive into composting.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.